Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Crosley Studios. We are doing a live remote from my backyard, Studio BY. Now, for American history, we've talked about a couple of things. We've talked about World War I. We've talked about how the United States got involved. We had, if my camera jiggles, I'm sorry, it's on the table. The Zimmerman telegram, that got the United States involved. One of the things that you need to remember is that the Americans really were a turning point for the Allies in the war because we were fresh, we were ready to fight, and our factories hadn't been damaged. Okay? So we were able to pump out those war goods and really help the Allied cause to defeat the Germans. You've got Wilson with the 14 points. Again, he called for a League of Nations. And because of the way our Constitution is set up, the president can negotiate treaties, but the Senate has to approve them. That's why we never became part of the League of Nations. All right, the Senate never approved it. There was a lot of politics to that. Also, the British and the French, they wanted to punish the Germans. They viewed the Germans as the real aggressors of the war. That's why that there was that article in the Treaty of Versailles, that the war guilt clause. And Germany pretty much had to sign it, or else the war was going to start up again. So to save their country, save the people, they signed it. All right. Heavy burden, all of that. All right. So now, Chapter 7, Lesson 4, what we're talking about here. Okay. The soldiers are coming home. Okay. Now, during the war, there were shortages of goods because everything had to go to the war. If you're watching this now, 2020, it's April 2nd. There is a shortage. Okay. People are trying to buy the goods. Well, it's the end of the war. Now all of these goods are ready to be bought by the people. They've got money in their pocket. They've been working in the factories, nothing to spend it on, so they race out and buy the goods. Well, one of the results of this is that we get inflation. Those prices that they're paying, they're going to inflate. So it's going to cost more money to buy the same good. All right. You can look at the price of gas. Right now, you can get a gallon of gas anywhere from almost $1.20 a gallon. I haven't seen it this low in years. But as that shortage of gas increases, or there's a more shortage of gas, that price is going to inflate. All right? Now, the workers, their wages didn't change. They stayed the same. So they want, there's all of these goods being bought. They want in on it. They want higher wages. Makes sense. So, for example, in Seattle, they called for a strike started, and it ended up being a general strike. 60,000 people go out on strike in the city, and the city gets paralyzed, and they've got to negotiate with that. Another major strike that happened was the Boston police strike. The police went on strike for better wages. 1919. We're a year out of the war. Not even. And so they go on strike, and 75% of the police force goes out on strike. They try to come back to work. They're not allowed. They're fired. And the governor, Calvin Coolidge, agrees with this. The police commissioner fired him. He says, yeah. And the governor says, yeah, they should be fired. So we're seeing some of the problems that are going on. And then one of the big ones, steel. U.S. Steel, if you think back to Carnegie, remember him from the very beginning of the year? Carnegie, the steel magnate. Eventually becomes what's called U.S. Steel. All right? 350,000 workers went on strike for better wages. Company refused to talk. They said, loyal Americans, you should come back to work. Be a loyal American, because it's those low down, dirty foreigners that are causing this strike. They're bringing their strange ideas over here. So you should be a loyal American. Don't go out on strike. Come back to work. All right? So again, they blamed it on foreign radicals. Kind of sounds familiar. All right? Because you've got to remember, we've got a lot of Eastern Europeans, and I'm going to talk about that here in a hot minute. About where they're coming from. Let me adjust the screen just a little bit more. All right. Also in 1919, we get race riots. Now, what's causing this? Well, first off, during the war, just before the war, Southern blacks, you got one of the great migrations, they moved north for jobs in the factories. All the men had been shipped off, so now we need workers. Hey, black people, they're willing to come here and work, and the factory owners actually paid them less. But that's neither here nor there. They took the jobs, and they did a great job. Well, you now have all of these soldiers returning home, hoping to get their job back, and here they find that they can't. And that also, some of the factory workers themselves are being laid off. So, who do the soldiers blame it on? They blame it on black people. Unfortunately, that was the case. To give you an example, in Chicago during this time, we had 2 straight weeks of riots, 38 people killed. The white people would go attack a black neighborhood. Next day black people would go attack a white neighborhood, and it just went on for 2 weeks. 38 dead, almost 100 people injured. It's not a nice place. Okay, and so this sort of made the black communities disillusioned. They thought, hey, we're helping to fight for freedom. We're showing them what we can do. Just like, if you remember back to Booker T. Washington, said, show what you can do, and you'll earn the freedom. And that's what they did. And they thought that they would earn their rights. Didn't happen. Okay? Now again, we're looking at who's to blame. The immigrants blamed immigrants. All right? I'm just kind of setting my notes up here. All right? So, you've got to look at the time frame. They're bringing, these immigrants from Europe, they're bringing these brand new ideas, socialism, communism. And first off, you look at the strikes. That has a bit of a communistic or socialistic aspect to it. So we're America. We're capitalists. We don't want that. You see that with the fight going on today. You've got the right, the Republicans, the far right, calling the Democrats socialists, communists, all of that, because they want to do certain things. But even bigger was the Russian Revolution. You remember back to World War I, the Russians had to get out of the war because of the Communist Revolution. It led to a fear that there was a red under every bed. That was the communist colors. Okay, and they figured that the communists were the one inspiring all of these strikes, and the communists are just sitting outside waiting to take over. Export this communist revolution. So we've got to crack down. That's why there was no negotiation with the strikes. There was, a fear, and that fear leads to something called the Palmer raids. It's in your textbook. Basically, it boils down to this: the post office. They intercept 30 bombs being mailed to very prominent people. All right. There's a riot that goes on in Cleveland right around the same time. They're striking. We just won the war, but things weren't really good at home. Okay, and right at that same time, there's 8 bombs. They all go off at once. It was time to go off. So there's definitely, clearly, some sort of conspiracy going on. We've got to find out. And one of those bombs explodes at the house of, guy's last name was Palmer, and he was the Attorney General at the FBI. So or not the FBI, the Attorney General for the United States. I'm sorry. And so what he does is he creates the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and they go and investigate to try to track down who's in charge of these attacks. All right, and guess who they targeted? They targeted people from foreign countries. They raided the offices of the Union of Russian Workers. Union, Russian, you know, this is kind of a easy target. Okay, didn't find much. They raided another 6,000 people and ignored their civil liberties. You have a right to, for the police to search you, they need a warrant. There were no warrants. What your Sixth Amendment right is, you're supposed to get to trial as quickly as possible. They arrested him and let him sit. Fifth Amendment, due process, meaning you've got to have a court case. A lot of these guys, or a lot of these people, I should say, not just guys, women too, they were arrested and with no trial shipped back to wherever country they were deported. Okay? And here's the thing. Very little information was turned up. They didn't find much. So it was a waste of time. But it made it look like they were doing something. And on the other hand, you now get calls for limits on immigrants. Okay? And we've talked about that, earlier on with immigration. From Eastern Europe, so many Polish people, so many Jews, so many Russians, all because of this type of fear. Okay? Well, it's been about 12 minutes. Kind of gave you a quick overview. So what I'm going to try to do for your classes is I'm going to record a couple of these every so often. I'm going to try to shoot for 15 to 20 minutes. This last section was a quickie, so not a big deal. All right. But I want you to watch them, rewatch them, take some notes. These will go along with assignments that you'll be getting. All right. So, miss you guys. I want to see you on the other side of this when it's all over. All right. Take care.